Welcome to a special edition of Nostalgia Alley. What if you could take your memories and put them in a box? Our next guest has done that, but it's not an ordinary box, it's a shadow box. Bob is from West Orange, a graduate from the Pratt Institute who creates a special art form, the shadow box. I think it's the first time ever in New Jersey TV we have a show on shadow. It's a first on shadow boxes. Bob has an interest in American history and has a vast collection of political shadow boxes. Talk about timely. This is it. Bob has exhibited all over the area at Exhibitors Co-op in South Orange, Maplewood, the South Orange Maplewood Adult School, Gallery 1978 in Maplewood, and the West Orange Arts Council and Studio Montclair. How do you find the time to do all this, Bob?
Well, I didn't do them all at the same time.
Oh, I'm relieved.
Yeah. Lovely people in all those places.
I bet.
I've been doing shadow boxes for over 30 years. And because of my interest in American history, I have done a series of presidential boxes with some others as well, using flotsam, leftover tidbits, fragments, and trying to position them in such a way that they would bring the subject to life or get them a little closer to us. One of my favorites has been this one of General Andrew Jackson with the American bald eagle. I called it Kindred Spirits. No one would mess with a bald eagle.
Nobody.
No one would mess with General Jackson.
Nobody.
And trying to put them together in an artistic and pleasing way, as well as reaching into the past and, as I say, trying to make them a little bit more to life.
Now, you have a lot of interesting things in that shadow box. Tell us what each thing represents.
In this one, I've got Jackson himself and the cutout of the eagle, and in the back I've done some creative things with I don't know if it'll show up, with the $20 bill, which at least at the present day Jackson's face is on, and I'm using some decorative molding again as a period piece or something to bring back the feeling of the time. Jackson was president in the 1820s and 1830s, and so decorative architecture like this would have been very appropriate.
Now, how did you get interested in doing this as an art form?
A man named Joseph Cornell died in the 1970s, had popularized boxes, and there are no rules. If you can get it into the box and it doesn't crawl away, it's go. If you like it, you keep it. If you don't like it, you move it around. Over here we've got President Eisenhower. Now, many of our viewers remember when Ike was president. Mm-hmm. I remember with great fondness. There were a number of wonderful things like rock and roll, television test patterns.
I love the television test pattern.
The American Legion, only a few years after World War II, was a real force to be reckoned with in the United States. And in every village and town, you would find flamingos. Flamingos would be on the lawn to indicate that the homeowner had been to Florida. This mark of prosperity
Yes.
and endurance. I remember we were in the car forever. Was something that you saw. You still occasionally see them, but I don't think.
Not too much
the
today.
meaning has been lost.
I know.
Yeah.
It's a shame. Because I was about to order one for my lawn, but now it's too late, Bob. It's too late. And we got some other great ones. Now, let's start with this, because this is a wonderful one. And I love the headlines. Tell us about it.
Okay. This is arguably Harry Truman's, the best day of Harry Truman's life. He had inherited the presidency after FDR passed on. He had a very difficult first several years in office. He was widely expected to lose the 1948 presidential election. The feeling of certainty was such that, among other things, the Chicago Daily Tribune in order to scoop its competition, ran a headline saying Dewey defeats Truman. A few hours later, after it became apparent that Dewey had not defeated Truman, Truman was hanging off the end of his whistle-stop railroad car, beaming and holding up this newspaper. It's a wonderful image, and it's classic Americana.
And he was one of the few presidents who wasn't a multimillionaire. He was really was a haberdasher, wasn't he? He came from modest means and became president. Today, if you want to become president, you have to have millions and millions and millions of dollars in super PACs. And he was really a people's president, I would think.
That's my sense of it, yes.
Absolutely.
This, in the back,
yes, that's wonderful.
At these various whistle stops, he crisscrossed the country and was greeted by crowds with these cards. Welcome President Truman. And they would cheer and they would hoot and they would holler, and he'd make a speech. And then he'd go on to the next stop. His managers would collect these cards and take them to the next town, distribute them to the crowd, and they'd get dozens and dozens of photo ops.
And that was a whistle stop. Tell our younger viewers what a whistle stop means.
A whistle stop has to do with a train coming in and out of the town, blowing the whistle to tell you that the candidate had arrived. Crowds would line up at the back end of the train, and in this instance, Truman would come out on the platform. Give him hell, Harry.
That's right, give him hell. The buck stops here.
True.
I remember that on this.
Actually, he's quoted as saying in response to that it wasn't so much that he was giving them hell, it was just that he was telling the truth and they thought it was hell.
I love it. Now we have an interesting one with a teapot.
We do indeed.
I love this one.
Let me. President Harding had a checkered career and a checkered life. During his term of office, there were all sorts of scandals, at least one involving him and a young lady he became amorously involved with while president. There was a tremendous scandal over oil leases at a place called Teapot Dome, hence the teapot. Harding had almost the historical good fortune to drop dead 2 years into his term, because heaven only knows what other mischief might have been afoot.
Not too much tea, that didn't cause his death, did it?
Not too much tea,
okay.
No.
That's
no.
good.
And because the boxes have a surreal quality, we can do things with them to juxtapose different elements so that we create like a different reality. I know President Harding was never in a teapot. I say that without fear of contradiction. But the imagery builds the story and builds the new reality.
And humor plays a very important part in what you do. And I think it's very evident with this one. Can I pick it up? Or I got it? Okay. I love this. This is where humor enters.
That would be at least two of us who love it, because it's one of my favorites as well. President William Howard Taft tipped the scales at something like 350 pounds. Shortly after becoming president, he managed to get his rather ample bulk stuck in one of the White House bathtubs. Police and various other folks were called to extract him. It had to be. I mean, the country thought it was hilarious. I think it's hilarious, but I'm not so sure that President Taft thought it was hilarious. There are pictures of the new White House bathtub, which was installed shortly thereafter, with 2 or 3 working men sitting in the tub. And
just to make sure.
So I'm thinking it's as much a swimming pool as a tub.
I love the little rubber duck there because every bathtub needs a rubber duck.
Of course, of course. For that matter, there's a poster for the selling seats on the Titanic, which went down in 1912 during Taft's term of office. And this was one that just sort of came together, everything. Him in that tub, just kill me.
I love it. I think that's great. Now, I notice all the interesting things you put into a shadow box. Where do you find all this material that goes into each and every one?
I am one of the world's most active squirrels. I have a house so full of stuff. I am unable to pass a yard sale, a rummage sale of any kind. And the justification for this is that you know that someday I'm going to find a use for these things.
Well, it's for art.
Well, it's
It's
art,
for art.
That's true. And at this point, I think I would have to be 700 years old to use up all the stuff I've collected, but we'll give it a shot.
We have a couple more years to go.
A couple more to go. I've done over 400 of these boxes, as I say, in the past 30 years, and some of them these are a little bit more traditional and a little easier to visualize. Sometimes they get very surreal.
Do you remember your very first shadow box?
I do.
The one that got you started?
I do. I had been to an exhibit at the Guggenheim Museum in New York where there were 3 or 4 boxes by Cornell on display. He had recently died, and I remember standing there looking at them, and there was a parrot, and there was wire, and there were leaves, and there were this, that, and the other thing, maps, puzzle pieces, game tokens, and I said, I could do that. That looks like fun. And I did, and it was fun. And as I said before, there are no rules, so if one has an artistic idea, you can go with it.
Now, who inspires you as an artist?
Well, besides Cornell, I'm pretty fond of Louise Nevelson, who is a recently deceased art sculptor who used wood fragments. Let's see,
I noticed on the ends there,
yeah,
the wood fragments.
I'm wondering if they're...
We're going to go
I've
part
got,
two.
I've
We're
got
going
at
to.
least one other fragment hidden in the stash.
And she lived to be well into her upper 90s, didn't she?
She did. In terms of my painting, I'm very fond of Van Gogh and have been for years.
I love Van Gogh.
Yeah,
You want to see my Van Gogh imitation?
please,
Say hello. Say Mr. Van Gogh, hello.
Mr. Van Gogh, hello.
What? Terrible. Anyway, on the second half, we're going to come back with one of
more
the
humor.
most popular presidents of all time. So stand by. We're going to come back with some more of this wonderful artwork. And right now, a public service announcement. I promise you, this public service announcement is not political.
After 17 years working as a mason, Mike was laid off. I met him when he came into the library looking for help. He found a job opening, but the application was only online. Mike said he'd spent his entire life around tools, but had never used a computer. I showed him how, and he ended up applying for numerous jobs online. I saw Mike the other day. His new computer skills paid off. He's working again.
New Jersey libraries are transforming lives. Tell us your story.
And we are back with Bob Freeze. I didn't mention your last name. Artist and, I might say, designer.
You might indeed.
Sort of an architect even with shadow boxes.
So,
Bob, you wear many hats. Anyway, this is, of course, what I was talking about. Probably the most beloved president of all time. Tell us a little bit about this fantastic shadow box. And a little bit of history of Lincoln.
yeah, I wanted to show Lincoln at different times in his life. The presidency has aged every person who's ever held the job, and Lincoln is no exception. He, of course, was president at a totally dreadful time in American history. The Civil War was beyond awful. What I was able to do, because Lincoln is as popular as he is I found a great deal of pictorial material. Try finding a picture of Millard Fillmore.
I know.
It will be
That's a hard one.
aggravating. Yes, Lincoln is everywhere. I've got him as he was in Congress, as he was first elected president, during the Gettysburg Address time in his life, and towards the very end, where his face is just grooved and his eyes are sunken and dark. It's a real testimony to the kind of effort that he put through simply doing the job day by day. And then, of course, at the very end, I've got a chunk of Mount Rushmore looking over his shoulder. But if America has a patron saint, Lincoln is it.
Is there a fact about Lincoln that most people don't know?
I'm thinking. I think his humanity gets less attention now. He's a historical character to the tune of more than 150 years. He's been gone, but Lincoln would be brought papers to condemn a Union soldier to death for something like sleeping on guard duty, which is admittedly a very serious thing. But he pardoned dozens and dozens of these young lads who had done nothing more than give in to unconsciousness from exhaustion. And there are numerous tales of the human side of Lincoln which don't get the coverage anymore. He's drifting away from us.
It's a shame we don't realize that about Lincoln, that it's not really known, the humanity that the man had.
Yeah. Someone else, and closer to our own time, is President Kennedy. There was a time when he was president, and after the assassination, when Kennedy was all over the news all the time. And times pass. I remember talking with my son, and this is several years ago. I mentioned Lyndon Johnson, and he said, "Who?"
Really? Wow.
I said, "Who? He was president recently, But
He was not a media savvy person, but he got a lot of things done through the back door,
True.
which people don't realize about all the things that Johnson did in his career.
True.
But not a kind of guy that worked well with a camera, which is a shame, because he did a lot, civil rights, and just so many wonderful things that Johnson did.
Yeah, one wonders what would have happened had Johnson not been bogged down with the disaster that was Vietnam.
I know.
So, moving
along.
Let me get this out of the way.
Okay.
I'm going to shorten this section a little bit.
We're building up suspense here with
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. John Quincy Adams, one of the most grim figures in the presidency.
Grim in what way?
No sense of humor.
None?
Not that I'm aware of. People might contradict me on that, but the picture of Adams, frosty New Englander, sitting in a blizzard in that formal chair and the formal outfit, for me, again, brings him to life.
Would that be his chilly personality? Because it's like a winter
yes.
scene that would represent that?
Oh, very, yes.
Very much so?
Yeah. I've, having worked in Massachusetts briefly and nearly being done in by the winters, I returned to New Jersey after a few years and was delighted to be back in New Jersey. And I've titled this particular piece, Massachusetts in July.
I love it.
Yeah.
What were some of the things he was noted for?
Well, among others, President Monroe got the credit for the Monroe Doctrine, but his Secretary of State, John Quincy Adams, did most of the work, most of the heavy lifting on that.
Now, we hear Monroe Doctrine a lot, but what exactly was that?
The Monroe Doctrine was a public statement to the effect that the United States would not tolerate encroachments by foreign powers in any of the Americas, not just our little part, but our moderate-sized chunk of it, but North and South America as well. So, I wanted to end with a story, as I mentioned before.
Yes.
We have a great number of wonderful stories to deal with politics and American history, and some of them are tug at your heartstrings, and some of them, what were they thinking? In this instance, back in 1885, a gentleman brought his young son to see President Grover Cleveland in the White House. Cleveland had been in office about 2 years. And Cleveland, from all accounts, had been having a very difficult day. He was weary, he was worn. The presidency was not so much fun that day. And Cleveland greeted the lad, patted him on the head, said, "I'm going to make a strange suggestion for you. It is a strange wish. It is my wish that you not become president." Who was he talking to?
Really?
Franklin Roosevelt,
wow.
age 5.
At age 5.
Little younger than he's pictured in my box, but arguably the greatest American president, and one of the top 2 or 3. Led us through World War II, led us through the Great Depression, did massive good in terms of fighting us and getting us out of the Depression. And a man with an incredible sense of humor, which is another reason I like him a lot. In any event, this is what we've got to show you tonight. My boxes will be on display, hopefully the whole set, at the Ethical Culture Society in Maplewood next September.
Oh, good. Now, I'd like to just go over some of the things that you show here.
Sure.
Bob? For instance, the
Oh.
great cigarette holder in the up position, which shows a positive attitude.
Oh, yes. FDR was elegant and cocky and just delicious when it came to what he was projecting. His sense of humor was charming. I particularly like the story about the time he addressed the Daughters of the American Revolution. Started his speech with "fellow immigrants," and moved on from there. Of course, the DAR, less than pleased. The rest of the country fell over, just howled with laughter, because it's so classic and it's so
Wonderful.
So Roosevelt, yeah.
And he was the longest serving president?
He
Roosevelt,
was.
how many
Thus
terms?
far, he was elected for 4 terms. He only lived 2 or 3 months into the 4th term before he passed on.
And here's a man who had a great handicap.
Oh.
And tell us a little bit about people who are not aware of his handicap and how it was handled.
Well, he was the only way he moved was either by hanging on to people and being propelled by them, or in a wheelchair. And there's a lot of thought that he would never have been elected today because many people in the United States in 1932, that was his first election, didn't realize that he couldn't walk.
And he had polio as a child that
Well, and more in his 20s.
his 20s.
That is a testament to what you can accomplish if you are in this instance, truly gifted, truly persistent, and just able to work with, well, that's politics, the art of the possible.
And he was faced with a Great Depression, and he gave people hope,
Yep.
which I thought was a wonderful thing that he did, and it really helped a lot of people.
I think that image of him with the cigarette is so upbeat, and the holder, and in the teeth of the worst depression in, I guess, world history.
There's a great museum, right, in New Hyde Park, right?
Hmm.
Tell us about that. Have you been there?
I have. There's his home, and then he and his wife Eleanor are buried in the garden at the house. But,
And Eleanor was a strong woman. But most people don't realize later on in her life, she actually, I guess for monetary reasons, did a Fleischmann margarine commercial.
I didn't know that.
She actually did that. That's many, many years ago. She actually did a Fleischmann margarine commercial, which is hard to think. But I actually saw a copy of that, and it's pretty remarkable.
I shall Google it this evening.
Now, do you have a
Keep in mind.
favorite president?
Oh, I do.
Who would be your all-time?
FDR.
FDR.
Easy. I like most of the great presidents, and I tolerate the middle ones, and I'm not so happy with some of those who were less than successful. But
Well, I think presidents then were concerned about the people. That's not so today, unfortunately. We don't have that. It's sad to say. But now tell us about your exhibit. I want to hear more about your exhibit.
well, I've done 42 presidential boxes, and I calculated, I counted it out. I think I can fit them all in the Ethical Culture Society.
you? And what day can we see this?
It's September, October, and November of 2016, so it'll be right at the time of the election. I have shown these things in a number of schools over the years. It's only the last. I've only once before shown all of them,
Right.
which was down in Glassboro. There's a historical society down there, and it was fun to see them all.
Great. Well, we're looking forward to seeing that.
Thank you.
Bob Fries, artist, designer, architect. You wear many hats, Bob. Your creativity is unbelievable. I want to thank you for coming on the show. It's really an inspiration.
Thank you, my friend.
And your knowledge of history is unbelievable. So until next time, this is Mike Sobel saying good night to you, and especially to you.